So, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this program with NAMI Greater Cleveland. Hope for the holidays, supporting yourself at a stressful time. We are hopeful that this topic will be coming at a good time for many of you as we anticipate moving into the holiday season. We're very happy to be joined by Carrie and Erin from Holy Family Hospice to talk more in depth about this topic. I'm going to start just by saying a few words about NAMI for those of you that may be newer to the NAMI Greater Cleveland community. And I'm also going to offer a few housekeeping notes as well. We should be ending by 7 p.m. tonight when we'll have time for questions and answers as well. But please be aware that our preference is that you remain muted during the presentation and also that you utilize the chat box if you have any questions during the presentation. I will be monitoring that for our presenters. And if the question is relevant to a slide that is currently be presenting, I will wait for a pause and we will make sure that your question is responded to. Aside from that, I don't think I need any more housekeeping notes. These slides will also be shared with you after the presentation, and there will be an evaluation for the presentation that is shared at the end as well. We really appreciate your due diligence in completing that for us. So for those of you that are newer to NAMI, I'm just going to talk a little bit about who we are. We are a grassroots mental health organization that was founded in 1979 in Wisconsin by a group of mothers of children with mental illness who were coming together in this grassroots movement formed around their kitchen tables out of a desire to provide more support and education for people in their local communities affected by the reality of mental illness. NAMI is now the largest grassroots mental health organization of its kind, and NAMI Greater Cleveland is the local NAMI affiliate that serves Cuyahoga County. We engage in work that supports the community around mental health in the areas of support, education, information and referral, and advocacy. We offer support groups for people with mental illness, support groups for the family, friends, and loved ones of individuals with mental illness. And we offer educational programs, including our 8-week peer-to-peer and family-to-family courses, as well as one-time educational offerings, such as this one that you are attending tonight. We also have a helpline that is available Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, where callers can seek referral to treatment resources or treatment options, as well as other social services related to mental health in the greater community. And NAMI supports advocacy in the sense of public awareness, raising awareness about mental health, reducing the stigma around mental illness, and engaging in legislative advocacy at the state and national levels of supporting greater funding for mental health, better, more access to mental health, more humane mental health treatment options. That is NAMI for you. And tonight, I'm very pleased to be joined, as I mentioned before, by 2 bereavement coordinators from Holy Family Hospice. And I think at this time, I will hand the baton over to the 2 of them to introduce themselves, talk a little bit more about the services offered by Holy Family Hospice so that you're aware they're in the community, and they'll lead us into our presentation for tonight. So take it away, Carrie and Erin.
Wonderful. Thanks, Matt. We appreciate that. And thank you all for being here. We appreciate you taking the time to be here tonight. I'm Erin.
And I'm Carrie.
And we make up the bereavement department here at Holy Family Hospice. We're going to get into our slides in a minute. We just wanted to kind of briefly just talk a little bit about our facility and our program, what we offer. Holy Family Hospice, Holy Family Home actually was started back over 60 years ago. It was founded by the Hawthorne Dominican nuns. And so it's been running ever since. We are a Catholic sponsored organization, but that doesn't mean that only Catholic people can be served by us. We serve all populations, all ages, well, I should say 18 and over. We serve everyone in the greater Cleveland area. We offer hospice, we offer home health care, and we offer palliative care. And as far as our roles here at Holy Family, we are, like I said, we're the bereavement department. Typically, how our services work is we follow up with families after their loved one has died on our hospice program. We follow up with the families for about 13 months after their loved one has died. We mainly do that in the form of follow-up phone calls and mailings. But additionally, we do provide individual counseling support and different support groups. Because of COVID, we've really had to kind of scale back a little bit, obviously, in seeing people face to face. We do a lot of telehealth services right now. We do individual counseling over the phone and via Zoom. And we do all of our support groups right now are virtual and via Zoom. We've had really great luck with it. We've had really, really positive response. All of our bereavement services are free of charge and they're open to anyone in the community. So if any of you have lost a loved one and after listening, you feel like maybe you could use some extra support, certainly reach out to us. At the very end of our slides is our contact information. We'll make sure we leave that up when our presentation is over. Feel free to reach out to us, call us, email us. All of our services are free. We don't bill insurance. We don't diagnose. We're really just here for some extra emotional support. So we're very grateful and humbled by the job that we get to do. It's a wonderful organization to work for. We're really grateful that we get to work here. And so tonight we're going to be talking about hope for the holidays, some ways to support yourself during the holiday season, which, as all of you know, can be a very stressful time, right? Yeah. Did I miss anything? Did everything covered? Okay. All righty. So we're going to go ahead and get started then. So we're going to start with this little cartoon. And you can see on the screen, it's Santa and he's knocking at somebody's door. And just around the corner is Cupid and the Easter Bunny. And the guy opens the door and he says, "Good grief, you're here already." We use this as kind of our intro to this presentation because, as all of you I'm sure are very aware, it seems every year that the holidays start a little bit earlier and earlier every year. I can remember a few years ago on Halloween night going to bed. I just kind of had gotten settled. I turned the TV on and the very first commercial that I saw was a Christmas commercial. I think it was for Macy's or JCPenney. Halloween wasn't even over. It was like 9 or 10 o'clock at night and they're already showing Christmas commercials. You can't walk into really any store right now, but some of those bigger stores, Costco, Home Depot, Kohl's, Target, without there being some sort of a holiday section, Christmas trees and lights and just so many things, and it just seems like earlier and earlier every year the season starts. And I always think of grieving people when, this happens. It's very hard for them to see those reminders of the holidays, especially when their loved one isn't around. So I always just, kind of think of them at this time of year, how difficult it must be to, walk into just a regular store. You go to Target to grab a few things and you're just kind of bombarded with the stress of the holidays. And as joyful and as wonderful as they can be, I think they're equally, they can equally be as stressful. So we're going to, talk about a lot of that tonight, and, give all of you some practical ideas for how to manage some coping skills, hopefully kind of help normalize and validate how difficult the holidays can be for everyone.
Oops. So the first slide we're going to talk about is more just kind of stigmas. And going into this presentation, we're going to talk a lot about grief, but also we're going to have some mental illness stuff as well, put through the presentation. And as all of you or some of you might know, if you do have a mental illness or you are suffering a loss, if it's grief, if it's a personal loss or just other losses due to the pandemic last year, this whole year that's been going on, these have been two really big relevant topics that have come up. So at first we just want to talk about some stigma. So the first slide goes over stigmas associated with mental illness. And there is way more on this list than I have up here. These are just kind of 6 that I kind of wanted to point out to all of you. But I think probably one of the biggest ones, at least that I've seen in my professional career, or that I've even have maybe heard in my personal life, is that people with mental illness are violent. And I think sometimes that can be seen through even the media, through movies, TV shows. that's kind of the first thing I think sometimes people think about is this person dangerous? Is he or she going to hurt me? And unfortunately, most people that have mental illness, if it's anxiety or depression or PTSD, aren't violent. It's just the stigma that's associated with it. Another really big one is just being lazy or unmotivated. Sometimes even from people I've heard in my personal life, if they're going through a really hard time, maybe their anxiety is working up or their depression is kicking in. Sometimes people in their life will say, get over it. It's just an excuse for you not to do something. In the third bullet says it's evidence of a character flaw. It's you're seen as weak. You're not weak. A lot of times there's kind of that lack of education around mental health, mental illness, which kind of leads to these stigmas. And again, not being curable, people with mental disorders having disruptive behaviors, not being able to contribute to society. I found a statistic that 80% of people with a mental diagnosis are able to function in a typical life. That's a really big percent. Or 80% of people are likely to kind of control their mental health diagnosis or their behaviors associated with it. So that is the type of stuff that should be out there, that majority of people that have anxiety, depression, or X, Y, and Z, or even though we're going to get into grief stigmas in a second, are able to function, they're able to live life, and they're able to work and have families and have children and travel and do all these things that people that don't have a mental health diagnosis is able to do. So I think as time is going on, I think these stigmas are getting better, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. I'm glad that there are organizations like NAMI that talk about it and bring that awareness. But it has a long way to go. But I am grateful for that. It is becoming more of an open conversation, and Erin and I are able to be here and talk about it, and you're all here to talk about it, and it can just make people feel not alone in their mental health.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about some grief stigmas because they're out there. I'm sure, all of you at some point in your life have probably experienced some sort of a loss. And, kind of Carrie hit on it on the last slide. Grief isn't just a person related death. It can be lots of different things. You can have, not working at a job anymore. You can grieve that. If you've had to move from your home to an apartment, or somewhere that was familiar to you that you no longer are living at, there can be a lot of grief associated with that. Loss of relationships, loss of friendships, whatever it might be. So grief isn't just death related. It's mostly what we deal with at our job is death related grief, but grief is so much more than that, as I'm sure so many of you know. So some of the grief stigmas, some of the really big ones, again, this is not a comprehensive list. This is not an exhaustive list. These are just some of the more common stigmas. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest one is time frame. We'll have people call us and it'll be maybe 3 months since their loved one passed away. And they'll say, I just spoke with a friend and my friend told me I need to get over this, or I really it's time for me to move on. And that can just be so insulting, for people to hear, especially when they're grieving. Or, a lot of times even we'll hear people at the 1 year mark say, well, it's been a year, I guess I should get over it by now. And, that's certainly never the case. And that's something that we never encourage people to do. That term, get over it or move on from it or whatever it is, it can be so hurtful for people to hear that. There's so many expectations with grief, you either have to be strong and not this like crying, wailing person all the time. People will worry if you cry too much, or if you don't cry at all and you act, it seems as though life is going on and life is okay and you're kind of holding your own. Then there's the expectation of, well, why aren't they more sad? Maybe they just didn't, what was their relationship with that person really like? So there's a lot of just misinformation and a lot of wrong conclusions that are kind of made, all around grief. Whoever your supports are, you could have this huge support system. You could have this great big family, and everyone thinks, oh yeah, they're good. They have, 5 other brothers and sisters. We've talked to so many people who have large families and their families just don't check in on them. Everything might be left to one person to do, to clean out a house or take care of the estate or, whatever it might be. So not having enough supports can, that can be something that people misperceive. They think, oh gosh, they have a big family, they'll be just fine. And that's not always the case. So there's so much more to it, but these are just some of the ones that we kind of wanted to hit on as far as some stigmas that we see that grieving people, have to kind of work through and deal with day in and day out. So the next one we want to talk about are the effects of stigmas. So stigmas, they can have a really profound effect on a lot of people. Stigmas they're society driven, I think a lot of times, and so that's really hard because obviously we all live in society and, we want to maybe put up a front like we're doing okay, whether it's the grief that we have or if we're carrying a mental illness or whatever it might be. Or even if you combine the two, it can be so difficult to try to maneuver, just through your day-to-day life. So the first effect is that why try effect, and it impacts the desire for people to seek help and seek support. They think, well, why even bother? I've already got this really awful thing going on in my life. Nothing's going to help. Maybe you've had failed attempts before at a medication regime or a counseling, session that just didn't go well. And you think, well, this is just how they're all going to be. So why even try it? It really has a big impact, on how people can kind of move forward and how they can work through, different struggles that they have going on in their lives. Self-discrimination, maybe feeling that your loss or your situation is less valid than someone else's. That's something that we talk about in a lot of our support groups. We talk about comparing losses. If we have a support group of, 10 people and all of them have lost a spouse, for example, we always encourage everyone not to compare their losses. Maybe you have someone who was married for 62 years and then you have someone who was only married for 10 years. And that person, both of those people are still grieving a loss. It's still very impactful for them. So sometimes that, when you're dealing with the grief and the stress and things like that, that self-discrimination, thinking that maybe your loss is less valid or, your feelings aren't as valid for X, Y, and Z number of reasons, who knows, avoidance, not feeling like you belong somewhere or feeling like your loss or your situation is less significant. And that's so hard too. These are all big effects that, these stigmas have on people. And then lastly, that decreased self-esteem, thinking to yourself or having a lot of that negative self-talk. I'm weak. This is my fault that it happened. I'm shamed, I feel a lot of shame for what happened, whatever it might be. And those are really hard things for people to have to work through, and grief and mental illness, whether you're dealing with one or the other or both, those all have huge effects on people and how they just kind of function in everyday life and how they just kind of move about their everyday world. So, these are just some things to kind of keep in mind as we move forward in some more of these slides.
So the next slide, we're going to talk about why the holidays are so difficult. And again, there's definitely more than on this list, but the holidays can be difficult for so many reasons for many people. And this list is just a list of reasons for just the typical person, grief aside, mental health aside. This list is just why in general the holidays are different. So the biggest one is really it's overwhelming. There is so much going on. If you think about it, once we hit October, there's Halloween, and then from October to January, there's 4 holidays. So Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, and then other holidays, Kwanzaa and, Hanukkah, all those different things. There's so many holidays that happen during that time, and different cultures and different people celebrate. It's a lot for people to process, and it can just be really overwhelming. There's a lot to do and not a lot of time. It just can be really stressful. Financial constraints is a huge one. If you are someone that celebrates Christmas, for example, having to buy gifts for everyone, especially if you're someone who likes to buy gifts, that can be really stressful. How am I going to afford all of these things? If maybe someone's low income, that plays into a factor with it. It's just, that can be a lot for someone to figure out their budget around the holiday season. Physical limitations and poor health. This is actually really has been a big one because of COVID. A lot of times if someone's been sick, you're not really going to be around them. Maybe if someone lives in a nursing home or assisted living, you weren't really able to see them. If you don't have good health, you can't necessarily drive. So really the pandemic has really kind of put even extra barrier on the health and physical limitations because people can't travel and people can't do things. And if you're not in good health, it just makes things more difficult to see. Time constraints, already kind of talked about time constraints. Family dynamics. I always say every time we do this presentation, I say there's always that, Uncle Bob and, Aunt Sue who might just annoy you and bother you. And maybe you avoid them throughout the whole year besides around the holiday season. And you're like, I have to see them. How am I going to deal with it? That can be, again, very stressful for people. How am I going to, deal with these family dynamics? Maybe if you come from a home that your parents are divorced and you don't know how you're going to balance seeing my mom's family, my dad's family all in one day. Those family dynamics can cause a lot of anxiety for people. And probably the biggest one on this list is expectations. There are expectations that people have to be happy around the holiday season. You have to love it. You have to bring joy. You have to be grateful. And when you're grieving, or even when you have mental health, it's really hard to do that. And the comparison I always use is the Hallmark movies. If anyone here watches Hallmark, I will admit I am guilty. I do love the movies, but they really, unfortunately, bring out the expectation about, the girl meets boy, boy hates the holiday season, girl loves the holiday season, girl changes boy, they fall in love, they have joy. And that's really unrealistic because the holidays, and we're going to get into why the holidays as we continue on the slides and why they're so difficult. But this is not realistic. The expectations that society has on us, and even the expectations we put on ourselves, can just be a lot. So this next slide is why the holidays are difficult, but with grief. So as you can tell, I have the same 6 bullet points, but they're bigger. So for people who necessarily are grieving, the holidays can be 10 times worse. So the overwhelming feeling, the family dynamics, the expectations, the time constraints, all of these things are just 10 times bigger when you're grieving. It just makes things feel worse. Things feel heavier. It's harder for you maybe to balance things and figure out how can I manage my grief on top of going to family dinners and seeing my friends and having to do X, Y, and Z. It just can make things a lot worse. And the last slide is with grief and mental illness. So again, as you can tell, these bullet points are even bigger. So if you are someone, and isn't it not everyone, but if you are someone who maybe has suffered a loss, but also maybe has depression or anxiety or other mental health in your life, it could even be even worse. It can even just feel bigger. It can kind of compact on each other, and it can just kind of grow. It's kind of that really bad cycle, that bad circle that's really hard to get out of. And the holidays for that can be that for people. It's really not, the joyful time for everyone. Kind of Erin said in the beginning, how when that, that Christmas commercial came on, how I think of all the grievers. It's so true. We think about people who necessarily don't like the holidays. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that don't. And there are so many reasons why. And it's really hard when you have all of the other things going on in your life, and to pretend to be happy and pretend to like something that you don't can be very energy draining.
So we want to talk a little bit about how having a mental health diagnosis can affect your holiday experience in general. Obviously, it's so important to, know yourself and know your limitations and things like that. So we just threw a couple statistics up there. 24% of people living with mental illness found that the holidays made their symptoms a lot worse. Carrie really just kind of hit on that. The holidays, they can just really magnify, maybe the not so good parts of, something maybe that you're already struggling with. 40% of people living with a mental illness found that the holidays made their symptoms somewhat worse. And then 64% of those people report that the holidays make their conditions worse, a lot worse probably. So, those numbers slowly kind of gradually go up, just goes to show that, again, not everybody embraces the holiday season. Not everybody says, I can't wait for, this, that, and the other thing. There can be a lot of dread, associated with the holidays, unfortunately. And so, things like lacking the holiday spirit, we've kind of already hit on that. Being overwhelmed, feeling, that just sense of overwhelming, like sadness. And I don't want to see people, but I feel obligated to, attend this service or, be at this event or whatever it might be. Triggers, holiday, emotional triggers. We're going to talk about those and, things that you can maybe kind of do to ease those triggers a little bit. Again, feeling pressure to participate and then giving gifts, kind of hitting on those financial constraints that we talked about too. So all of those things, and then Carrie's going to talk about the rest of this list, they have they're so impactful on your mental health, especially during this time of year.
And the last four, lack of sunlight, there is a seasonal affective disorder, which is a really real thing. Then the sun goes away, especially now that the time change, it's, dark by 5:30, which I know for me, I hate that. I really do. I hate how dark it gets really quickly. It can just bring down your mood a lot, hard to reach out to others, increase pressure and expectations, which we talked about, and then increase stress. And all this whole list, all the things that Erin talked about and I talked about, all of these things that are common around the holiday season can really affect someone with mental health, especially the stress. I think the pressure and the stress for people, for example, if you have, let's say, generalized anxiety disorder and you're anxious throughout the day and you really struggle with your anxiety, when you get to a part of the year where there's more pressure for you to do things and more pressure for you to go places and more pressure for you to be X, Y, and Z, it's possible that your anxiety is going to increase. Same with depression. It's possible that, again, the lack of sunlight, that might affect your depression. So all of these things can definitely affect the anxiety, depression, your grief, whatever it is, triggers. If you're around things that remind you of things that you can't do, or, let's say, for example, you're in AA and you're around parties with alcohol, that can be triggers, and that can then increase your mental health. So there's so many different things that on this list that can really affect someone's mental health and just increase that for people in their lives.
So we're going to talk about some common reactions, and this one is a little bit more related to grief. And so how we explain this particular slide is all of these words on here, all of these, bullet points that you see are a lot of what people experience very shortly after they've had a loss, whether it's a loved one that's passed away, like I said, maybe a relationship ended, whatever it might be. So the things like increased fatigue, loneliness, tearfulness, faith struggles, increased anxiety, those are all very common reactions in grief that we have seen. But when this time of year comes up again with the holidays, a lot of times people feel that their grief is kind of maybe starting over again, or things are just kind of increasing for them all over again. It can really, the holidays this time of year can really increase people's grief responses and grief reaction. So a lot of times, let's say we had a patient who passed away in January, and we've been following up with their loved one all along. It's not uncommon for us to receive a phone call from someone who's had a loss, 9-10 months ago, to call us and say, something's wrong, something's wrong. I feel like I'm grieving all over again. I feel like I lost my mom all over again, and so we very, try to gently just remind them that this is what the holidays can do. It's kind of like you've had a Band-Aid over your loss all along, these last few months, you've been working on it, you've been tending to it and things like that. And then the holiday season comes up and that Band-Aid just gets ripped off and your wound is exposed all over again. And you're feeling a lot of the same feelings that you felt right after your loved one had died or right after you've had that loss. So it's not uncommon for people to feel more tired, more short-tempered, have those faith struggles, that increased anxiety. It's also okay, to have some of the good things. It's also okay to feel joy this time of year, to feel hopeful. There's certainly nothing wrong with that by any means, but a lot of times for a lot of people, this time of year can just bring up a lot of, emotions for them that they thought, gosh, I thought I was good. And we always try to remind people, you are good, you're doing a good job. but this time of year can just bring up a lot for a lot of people. So just kind of keep that in mind as you move forward. If you're experiencing any of these things, just remind yourself, okay, this is normal. I know it's gonna, it will pass, but it's also very normal for me to be having these reactions.
So one of the biggest reasons why, as Erin said in this last slide, why some of these emotions kind of come back up the surface for people is because of triggers. And specifically for grief, there's a term that we use. It's called sudden temporary upsurge of grief. And that's what we call a STUG. So Mike, Erin and I, we talk about this in our support groups and individual counseling. STUGs are really important, and so are triggers in general. So if it's, if you're here because you have had a loss and you're grieving, or you're here because you do have mental health, or you're just here because you don't like the holidays and you just want to learn how to cope with it, triggers are really common in all kind of these domains. And there are different reasons why these triggers happen. Now, they happen in general, even not around the holiday season, but we found that especially around the holiday season, they can increase for people. As Erin said, your anxiety increases, maybe your sadness increases, you have a harder time sleeping. And again, the biggest reason why is because of all these triggers. So there's a list of here different things that we have seen when it comes to triggers that we've seen like in our support groups and with our clients that have really kind of been these thugs for them. And the one thing is baking and cooking and decorating. So an example of a trigger would be, let's say you're walking in the grocery store and you're going down the aisle, you're grabbing your groceries, and all of a sudden you go for a cereal. And that cereal is the cereal that your loved one who passed away always ate. And you realize, oh, wait a minute, I don't need to buy this anymore. And all of a sudden you start to feel that lump in your throat, maybe your chest starts to pound, you start to sweat, tears get into your eyes, and you have to leave the store. You just start to maybe, if you're a crier, or maybe you get angry, whatever it is, you just have this really intense ball of emotion. And that's what a trigger is. It happens really suddenly. So when you're decorating, baking and cooking, those things can be really big triggers for people. If you're driving down the street and you see, a decoration in the front yard, or again, maybe you see someone baking something, or you smell something that reminds you of someone who's passed away, that can be a really big trigger. When things go wrong, in general, when things go wrong, typically most people get maybe annoyed by that or irritated, like, dang it, that didn't go the way I want it to. But when you are grieving, or even maybe if you have mental health, when things don't necessarily go the way you want it to, it might irritate you a little bit more, might bother you a little bit more. It might just get under your skin, not the way that it used to. Again, family and friends, like I mentioned earlier, that Uncle Bob and Aunt Sue, those people can be really big triggers for you. If you're already having a hard time and you have to be around certain people, if it's family or friends, that can really just bring up those emotions for you. Holiday cards. Now, again, this is more specific for grief, but we kind of have been told if let's say you lost a spouse and you're signing a holiday card and you don't write your loved one's name, that can be a trigger for people. Or maybe receiving holiday cards can be a trigger for people. Maybe reading on holiday cards, be happy, be joyful, love the season, that can be triggering for people. And then attending religious services, if you are religious, can also be triggering as well. So there are so many different more triggers and stugs, but the biggest thing I want you all to know is that they're normal. If you're going through this holiday season, or in general, if you start to feel a trigger come up, you start to feel a stug come up, you get that lump in your throat, they're normal. And it's okay to feel it. It's okay to let it in. And sometimes it's a lot better to feel your emotions than to shut it down, because it's going to come out eventually and you're feeling it for a reason. So if you're going to take away anything from this slide, is just know that they're normal. And if you do have a trigger and maybe you thought about it, like, oh, wait a minute, that's what I experienced 2 weeks ago. If it happens again, tell yourself that. Tell yourself, oh, wait a minute, I'm having a trigger. I'm having a stug. This is what this is. And it's normal. And sometimes being able to validate yourself and to tell yourself that it's normal can make you feel more comfortable with how you're feeling.
All right, so we have another little cartoon here. So we have a person, it looks like they're getting ready maybe to decorate for the holidays. They have a box of lights and ornaments and holiday stuff. And so she's reading a book, and the book is Coping with Holiday Stress. And the first thing, number one thing to do is take a nap. So, wouldn't that be nice? Every time we get a little bit stressed out, the holidays or any time of year, open up that book. Oh yeah, take a nap. Okay. We'll talk a little bit about self-care, but we just thought that this was kind of a cute, little cartoon. The next couple slides we're gonna talk about, use the example of decorating. But this is, we want you to kind of think of it as very, general as far as celebrating the holidays, but we're going to use Christmas trees as our example. So let's say, you are a person who celebrates Christmas, and this is what your tree historically has always looked like. Every inch of that tree is covered. There's not a single limb or branch that doesn't have a bow or a star or a light or something on it, an ornament. This year you're thinking about, okay, maybe you've had a loss. It's been a significant loss in your life. It's been a hard year. And you're thinking, gosh, what do I want to do this year? Do I really want to celebrate? Is this how I want my, holiday season to look like? Yes or no is the correct answer. There is no right answer. It has to be what is going to work best for you. So historically, if this is what your holidays or your tree or whatever it might be has always looked like, you go all out, you do all the big things, you pull out all the stops, nothing gets untouched. If that's what you need to do this year to continue to bring yourself some joy and, have a great holiday season, then by all means, that's perfectly fine. If this is what your holidays, in a sense have always looked like, and you want that to continue, absolutely, by all means, please continue to do that. If this looks like it's a little too overwhelming, but you still want to do something, then maybe you just get it, for example, maybe you just scale it back a little bit. So maybe you're just going to go out to Home Depot, you're going to find the first pre-lit tree you can find, you grab it, you pay for it, you throw it in your trunk, you get home, pull it out, fluff it up a little bit, plug it in. That's it. I'm done. That's as much as I can do this year. I can't possibly think about doing anything else. I can't pull a single box of ornaments. I don't want to put any bows on. I want to do something, but I want to keep it minimal. So this is a very perfect example of that. And again, in general, for how your holidays might look, you want to be present. You want to say yes to all the invites, but you're just going to scale it back a little bit. And maybe you're only going to say yes to 3 invites instead of 5 invites or whatever it might be. It's okay to scale it back. It's okay to, this year, do what you have to do for yourself to take care of yourself. Now, if you need your holidays to look a little bit like this little tiny tree, it's like a little 1-foot tree. It's already decorated. Everything's already on there. You grab it from the attic, you pull it out of the box, you stick it on a table, you're done. No effort, very minimal effort, I should say, goes into decorating or celebrating or whatever it might be. If this is what you need your holiday season to look like this year, then by all means, let this little tree represent your holidays. And then lastly, if this is what you want your holidays to look like, this is an actual blank screen. If you don't want to do anything this holiday season, if it's too much, if it's just been the worst year, you can't seem to muster any effort or any energy to do anything this year, you just need to take a pass on the holiday season, then do that for yourself. There's no, we talked before about the expectations. You have our permission this year. You have our permission to say, I'm skipping it. I'm not doing anything. I'm going to order pizza on Thanksgiving and I'm going to sleep until the day after New Year's. And that's what I'm going to do. And nobody's going to tell me anything different. It's okay to kind of take a step back if that's what you need to do. Not everybody can do, the entire, tree and decorating and hosting and whatever it might be. It's okay to kind of scale it back a little bit. And if that's what you decide to do this year or any year in the future, it doesn't mean that that's what your holidays always have to look like from that point on. You can scale it back a little bit, and then a year or 2 from now, you can go back to what you were always doing and what you were always used to doing. But again, you have our permission at any time if you need to, do some, do all, do none, whatever you need to do to take care of yourself is what is the most important thing. And then we'll end that little segment on this little cartoon. And it says, it's a person, it says, "You're grieving, give yourself a break this holiday season." And she looks like she's got her tree out and she puts one little ornament on and she says, "Meh, that's enough for this year." That's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. If that's what your tree needs to look like this year, or your holidays in general, let that be, do what is going to be best for you this holiday season.
So next we're going to go into some coping skills and how to cope with the holiday season. And, Erin kind of stated this throughout those past slides. The biggest thing is doing what's best for you. And that's what a lot of these coping skills really harness. It's doing what's best for you. If that's limiting family gatherings, if it's not, going to stores to shop, if it's just doing self-care all the time, that is what's best for you. So the first three, the holiday baking, the holiday cards, and the dinner and meals, all those really encompass that. If you're someone, I'll use Thanksgiving, for example, that's coming up in a couple weeks. If you are someone that always hosts a Thanksgiving, but this year, you just can't do it. If you're super stressed, if you're having a hard time, maybe, your anxiety is increasing, or, you are grieving and you just can't do it. It's okay to scale back. It's okay to say, you know what? I can't cook everything this year. Why don't you guys cook the sides? I'll just cook the turkey, whatever it is. Same with baking, holiday cards. Maybe only mail out 5 or 10 holiday cards versus 50. It's okay to scale back and do things differently. And as Erin said, it's okay not to do anything at all. Saying no is a really big one on this list I like to go over. It's okay to say no. It's also okay to say maybe. So let's say, for example, something's coming up in December, there's a party that you were invited to, and they said, "Please come. We want you to come. We want you to be there." And you just don't know if you want to come or not. It's okay to say, you know what? I'll let you know how I feel the morning of. If I'm feeling like I want to go for it. If I'm not, I'm not going to go. And what we found a lot, and that's why that one's so important, is because with grief, and I'm sure maybe even mental health as well, things change. Things aren't always set in stone. Your mood goes back and forth. So there are some days where you're more willing to want to do something than others. So it's definitely okay to say maybe, but it's definitely okay to say no. Don't feel pressure to have to go to things. It's really important to put yourself first every once in a while. Have a plan. We're going to talk about that in a couple of slides, but have a plan going into the holiday season. So an example would be, let's say you're going to church and you haven't really been there in a while, and you're kind of nervous and you don't know if you're going to be able to sit through the whole service. Sit by the exit. Don't sit in front. Think about these things. Or if you are going to a holiday party and you're not sure how long you're going to be able to stay there, bring a friend with you who that will be okay with you leaving early. Drive yourself. That way you don't feel pressure having to wait till your friends to leave. So it's okay to kind of think ahead and think about, how can I plan the best to help calm my anxieties or worries or my grief going into these certain events. Mm-hmm. Again, leave when you want to. Know your limits. Be patient with yourself. And most importantly, know where you're at. It's okay to be where you're at right now. We're human. We go through things. We have hard times. We go through trauma. It's okay. I know so much, it's easier for me to say it than to experience it, but it's okay to meet yourself where you're at. It's okay to say, you know what, I can't do it this year. I really can't. And as Erin said earlier, it doesn't mean that next year it's going to be the same thing. Next year, you might be like, you know what, I'm actually doing okay this year. I think I can maybe celebrate a little bit more. Nothing is ever set in stone. So provide yourself that self-compassion. Mm-hmm. Provide yourself the support that you would other people. And then lastly, ask for help. Seek support. Mm-hmm. There is individual counseling, for grief and for mental health. There's grief support groups out there. Again, as Erin said, we provide these different services. There's other services in the area that you can absolutely go to if you need any type of support. Psychology Today is a really good website to look for counseling and for therapists. So there is support out there. And, asking for help can be really hard to do if it's from a professional or from friends or family, but people aren't meant to carry their pain alone. And what we have found a lot in our, and where we working with our client base is that validation is really important. Having someone tell you, oh, it's normal what you're going through. It's okay what you're going through versus telling you, oh, get over it, move on, suck it up. It's not a big deal. That doesn't work. You have to, or even people that maybe tell you, be happy, try to be happy, think about the positives. That doesn't work either. That validation of what you're going through is really important. And when you seek support and ask for help, hopefully you're able to get that. So if everything else fails and you really do need help, it's okay to ask for it. Everyone does. And, it's a really important part of the process. So the next slide is coping with family dysfunction. So again, we've talked about this. So the little meme we put on there is, let's celebrate the holidays by knowing that our dysfunctional family is no different from any other dysfunctional family. And I thought that was kind of funny and clever. And, it kind of encompasses the slide is that every family, no matter how perfect they seem on the outside, every family is not perfect. Every family goes through dysfunction. And yes, there's different severities of it, but every family has something going on, no matter how perfect it might seem. So here are just different things that kind of help cope with it. One, beware of how you contribute to the situation. What things do you bring into the dysfunction? Awareness is key. If you're able to pinpoint, I know when this thing happens, this really bothers me, or I know if I say this stuff to someone, that's going to upset them. Maybe I shouldn't do that. It might be able to help overall with any type of conflict that occurs. Again, nothing is perfect. And maybe being able to tell yourself that is nothing's perfect. It's dysfunction. Yes, how frustrating this dysfunction can be. Dysfunction is unfortunately a normal part of society. Again, self-awareness is really essential. Self-care is super important. Again, if you're gonna be around your family and that that's going to be a trigger for you. One, again, it's okay to say no, if that's what you really need to do, but also just take care of yourself. Maybe try to plan something in your head of, I'm going to go to this family get together, but afterwards I'm going to get my favorite dessert after this. I'm going to treat myself to something really good. Provide yourself that self-care during that time. Make peace before a family gathering. So maybe do self-talk, talk to yourself about, how you can get through it, those type of things. Limit alcohol, unfortunately, as some of you might know, the more you drink or use, the higher people's anger can be. So limiting that as much as possible can definitely help. And then understand how you deal with your stress. And that's really important one too. Everyone copes with stress differently. Everyone handles stress differently. So again, the more that you understand that, the easier it may be to help deal with it. If it's calling a friend, if it's maybe bringing a stress ball with you to family gatherings, if it's bringing a book with you, whatever it is, find something that might help work. If it's working out, after or before, just finding something that can help deal with the stress. So the more that you understand yourself and the more you understand of what your triggers are and how you can help cope with that, the easier it might be to handle with this family dysfunction.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to talk about some plans for dealing with holidays after a loss, or again, when you're kind of just in the thick of working through a mental illness or whatever it might be. So, that first bullet point just says to identify which individuals you're going to spend the holiday with. Again, plan ahead, having some sort of knowledge about who's going to be there, how many people are going to be there, where do you need to, do you need to strategically place yourself somewhere, at one end of the room, and the other family member who maybe you don't have a great relationship with, do they need to be at the other end of the room? Who's going to be there and who are you going to be spending the holidays with? Are you planning on spending them alone? And if you are, make your family aware of that and let them know, this is my choice. This is what I need to do for myself this year. Like Carrie said, you can always be a maybe at a holiday gathering, at a family gathering, I'll let you know, I'll wake up in the morning and just see how I'm feeling. Decide what you want to do about traditions. Some families are very, very particular about their traditions. If you need to change it up a little bit this year, then change it up a little bit this year, but talk about it ahead of time instead of just, getting to, maybe at Thanksgiving dinner and saying, we're not doing what we always used to do. I can't handle that this year. Talk about it, communicate, let people know kind of where you're at and what you need this year. if you've had a loss, and Carrie's going to talk about this a little bit, find ways to incorporate your loved one in the holidays. What are some things that you can do? Kind of the overall theme of this slide is really just kind of having a plan, being prepared, and communicating with people. The more that you can do that, going into a big event, going into a major holiday, the better off you're going to be. If okay, this is the plan, this is who's going to be there, this is what time I need to arrive, I'll probably leave around this time. If you have all of those kind of set plans in place, it's going to make that day a lot easier, which hopefully will decrease your anxiety a little bit as you move into whatever family event or social event or whatever it might be, as you go into that event for that day.
And then the last slide you want to talk about is how can you incorporate your loved one in the holidays? So again, this is more centered around, people who've had a loss. And what we have in term of grief is called continuing bonds. So continuing bonds is just continuing the relationship you had with your loved one, even though they're no longer physically here. So again, there are many different things on this slide. There's many more that other people can do that's not on this slide, but these are just more specific ones that I like to share with everyone, especially for the holiday season. So, some examples are making your loved one's favorite dish. If it's cake or cookies, or if it's a specific meal, make it for them. Maybe sing their favorite songs, play their favorite music. A memory tablecloth was a really cool idea that I read. It was taking a memory cloth and like a cloth and writing your loved one's favorite memories on there that you had with him or her. And then every year bringing that tablecloth out and writing even more memories. Lighting a candle, having a candle ceremony. Sharing your loved one's favorite stories, memories or stories is always a very good one. It just makes them feel more alive. Make a donation to your loved ones, a charity for your loved one if maybe they died of a certain disease or cancer, ALS, whatever it was. Sometimes donating to that certain cause can definitely be a good way to kind of continue their memory. Go somewhere that you feel close to them. If it's at the cemetery or a restaurant, whatever it is, going somewhere that you feel their connection, and then adding an extra plate on the table. Sometimes people will, wherever your loved one would sit at the dinner table, they would put a plate there and an empty glass, and maybe put a picture by their plate to feel that they are there. And all of these things are really, really healthy ways to help grieve. There's getting a tattoo is a really becoming a popular one for people for their loved one, and maybe carrying around like their ashes and a necklace. There's so many different things, and they're so healthy. They're just a really good way to feel that connection with your loved one, to feel close to them. And it's a really good way to help grieve during the grieving process, very therapeutic for people. So if you have had a loss and you have done these things, it's normal. It's completely okay. And it's really, really healthy to do so. So we always encourage people to continue that bond with them. And because it can make, again, it can help the grieving process. When you're grieving, you want your loved one to feel more alive, because for you, they're always going to be. So the more that you can kind of show to other people who they were and incorporate them in special days, it can just really help that process.
Absolutely. That kind of concludes that, wraps up our presentation for today. We just, again, want to thank you. We want to thank NAMI, and thank you, Matt, for hosting this and for allowing us to come on and share some of our thoughts and our ideas. Our contact information is here, so please feel free to jot it down. Please don't hesitate to reach out to either Carrie or myself if you feel like you could use some extra support this holiday season. There's certainly no obligation by any means, but if you feel like you could talk to somebody, we do provide more of the grief and loss support. So please reach out to us if it's something a little bit beyond our scope of what we're able to provide. We will do everything we can to try to help you get connected. But we're really grateful for all of you being here today, and thank you all very much.
Thank you to Carrie and Erin for that great presentation. I did put in the chat the link for the evaluation for this presentation. If everyone could please open that up and take care of that before we end. It should only take a minute or two. It's anonymous. We really appreciate your honest feedback, and doing those evaluations helps us report more robust data to our funders so that we can continue to do things like this free of charge to the community. So I'll put the link for that in the chat once more. But I did want to make sure we do have about 5 minutes left. So if there are any questions or any comments, anything that you would like to share after receiving this presentation, feel free to unmute yourself and share, or feel free to put something in the chat and we can see what we can do for you. So I'll open that up now. Any questions, any comments? I really appreciate, I just want to say that I appreciate the metaphor of the different stages of scaling back the holiday observance. I think that that's one that I feel is really helpful, knowing that we will be dealing with a lot of stressors. So I thank you for that. I always appreciate seeing that. It looks like Steve raised his hand. Feel free to share, Steve.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear about these programs. My mother passed away with home hospice care with Holy Family in 2012, and there weren't a whole lot of options. I remember my father received 2 calls, but I did inquire about family counseling back then, or, they said they didn't have it back then. And so it's nice to have that option. I happen to have a friend where my dad was in the nursing home, and he met with me periodically. So that kind of worked out in its own way. But I probably should have listened to this presentation 25 years ago, because I used a number of those things. You just kind of stumble on them, and some of it's the proverbial common sense thing, but a lot of those tips are very, very useful. And
I'm so glad. Yeah. And even Steve, being 25 years out from a loss, or how many years you are, grief is still very relevant, and it's still a big part of who you are. So no matter how far you out are, if it's 3 months, 20 years, 50 years, the stuff that we talk about can be helpful to anyone, because your grief is still there, and you're always going to miss the people who pass away. So it's always good to still get that validation.
yeah.
Thanks,
Steve. Thanks for being here.
Any final thought before we conclude? Just to remind you one more time to complete the evaluation. And I will be sharing these slides with all of our attendees tonight shortly. So you can look for an email from me. And if that's it, I guess we will. We got a nice comment from Lorna. Thank you so much for your coping skill suggestions. Absolutely.
Wonderful. You're welcome, of course.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, and hope you have a great evening and take good care during the holiday season.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for allowing us to share.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Have a great night, everyone. Thank you.